Yeah, we're live. I am back, as I told you I would be. Hopefully, for the guys that showed up this morning, it was great to be back from what was kind of a vacation. We were off on a little adventure this weekend, but I'm back. Did the live feed this morning to it's Monday motivation for you guys to go out and get your projects done. I got my big block Chevy out of the back of my truck, so I count that as a win. At least the block and all the stuff, got it up on the stand, and I'm getting it ready to paint. That will be the next thing. I need to paint the heads and the block, paint them Chevy orange because it's going to be a 396. It already is a 396. Actually, it's a little bit bigger than that because it's 60 over. But I'm going to put together the reproduction of the 375 force 396. We talk about that all the time. So that was my project, but that's what the mornings are for. They're for the motivation to get your projects done. So hopefully you'll watch and you'll make you want to go out and get something done. And the live feed tonight, as I promised you, you can see the quote from David Freiburger. This is a text I got while they were down there doing. I was here minding my own business, doing videos and stuff. And I got a text from David because he was with Brulé and Dulcich. They were doing Engine Masters. And he knows that I was doing the Pontiac stuff, the trophy 4-cylinder. So he sends me the text of the two photos. I put them together in the thumbnail. If you haven't taken a look at the thumbnail, you can take a look at it. I put them together in the thumbnail. One of them is a picture of the intake manifold by itself. The other one is what this thing was used in and what it looked like when it's actually on a motor and running. It was in some kind of Econo rail dragster or something. But it's for the Pontiac Trophy 4-cylinder. So that's half of a 389 V8. Pontiac made these back in the 60s. The one I have is a 1961. And we're putting it back together to run it because the one that I got, my eBay special, was exactly that. Sometimes you get your money's worth. and I got less than my money's worth. So we're rebuilding that. But when we do, we're going to run a bunch of tests on it. Freiburger knows that I was doing it because I've talked to him a couple of times about it. And so he sent me over this photo, and the photo is of the intake manifold and then of this dragster with the intake manifold on one of these motors with the blower on it, which I can't tell from the photo because this is this kind of a side hack design. It goes off to the side basically. So the blower sticks out, you grab air like that and stuff. I don't know if it's a 371 blower because I made those, or a 471 probably would be more common. I don't think that manifold is set up to accept a 671 because I don't know why you'd run a 671 on something that's that small. Unless you were wanting to turn it all the way up. This also brings the question, well, if we run a blower like that, couldn't we also sandwich an intercooler in there? And yes, I think you could. It would be a good idea, especially on this application, because what's going to happen is on a 4-cylinder like this that's making, it's rated at between 100 and 166 horsepower. Let's say we did something to it and it worked a lot better, and all of a sudden it's making 200 horsepower. Even a 200 horsepower motor, an NA motor, if you put one of these blowers on there, to make any power, you have to run a lot of boost. And the few videos that I've seen of these motors running with this type of blower on it, with a Roots blower on it, all the boost levels were very, very high, which is not great for a Roots supercharger. Even if it has the flow capacity, that sort of pressure ratio on a Roots blower is not good. I hope I don't offend all the Roots blower guys, but the reality is that that's a terrible supercharger for very, very high boosts. I know all the top fuel guys are going to join in and say, but what about, that's great, you have nitromethane. But so it's not a great choice for that. But the thing is, I had already planned to run a TORQSTORM centrifugal supercharger on this because TORQSTORM has a kit for Pontiacs that bolts onto the V8. I've got half of a V8, so lucky for me, I have the place where it bolts on in the front, just like I did with the V6 on the small block Chevy on the TORQSTORM. We bolted that on the V6 because the front dress is the same. Same thing here with the Pontiac. We have half of it on the front, and actually, we technically have a little bit more than half of it. But it will bolt on, and so I can run that blower into whatever intake manifold I want, and that will work just fine. So I can run boost to it, which is cool. But, and also I plan obviously on running a turbo because we have an exhaust manifold. We just have to route that exhaust to a turbo, run it to a blow-through carburetor and or EFI, which we plan on running as well. Again, we can run boost in that manner, and that was already part of the plan. We'd already talked about that many, many times. Then this came along, And by the way, I don't have the money to buy this thing anyway, so it's kind of a moot point. And I told David that, I said, look, as awesome as this is, I see awesomeness like all the time that I want, and my want far exceeds my ability to to justify needing it or getting it. But because you can see the price on this thing is very pricey. I don't know if it's visible in the photo or not, but it was, because this came from an ad that the guy was trying to sell this. But the centrifugal blower or a turbo, or a turbo, both cool, both add boost, both are very efficient. I think the centrifugal blower might be a better choice for this. Not more so than the turbo, but more than the roots blower, just because it's not going to make a big torque number, and that might help make this motor under boosted conditions last a little bit longer. But neither one of those is anywhere near as cool as this side hack blower roots deal. And I think if you look closely, I don't think that they're running carburetors on it. I think that they're running injection on it. The thing that I was thinking about doing, and this was a consideration when I first saw this, because somebody had sent me photos of this thing before, and I had seen the video on YouTube of somebody running one of these blowers where it made 400 horsepower, 500 horsepower, something, and running that blower on it when they're running it on the dyno. And so they're running lots of boost, and it made good power. And it's very, very cool. What I was thinking is, since I'm planning on running V8 intake manifolds on this 4-cylinder anyway, which you could certainly do, why don't I just make an adapter plate that goes on top of the carburetor, which that sort of thing was done all the time back in the day for applications that they didn't have blower manifolds for. And quite honestly, it can be a better way to go, because if you have a dual plane manifold and you're blowing into that, you get the benefit of the dual plane design, which a lot of these blower manifolds are just these short, stubby runners in a common plenum, and then the boost is blowing into it. And because you have boost, it makes good power, but it's not going to make the power that blower would, even having immediate boost. It's not going to make the power that blower will on top of a dual plane manifold. It's going to be better yet. So that's what I was thinking. I was thinking an adapter, and then the manifold, then the blower would be sticking straight up, which means you wouldn't be stuck with running fuel injection because you, or some sort of, L adapter for the carburetor on top of it, or a side draft carburetor, something like that. I mean, all of that's easily solved, but it'd be much easier if the carburetor is just sitting where God and nature intended it, on top of the supercharger, and the supercharger is on top of the manifold, even though this is only a 4-cylinder. But all of that would work. And then then you just have to run and then the thing is, with the adapter plate, the thing that I liked about that is because then you start going down the rabbit hole. Well, there's nothing saying that I have to just run one of these little roots blowers. I could also run a twin screw. I could also run a junkyard M90 or a 112 or a 122, all of which I have. So you could run small, cheap blowers like an M90 from a 3.8 liter V6. We know that could make 500 or more horsepower if it's properly tuned up. We could run the M112 from the 03 Cobra. You can run an M122 or a 2.3 liter. All of those are readily available. Heck, you go nuts and put a 2650 Kong on there if that's what you wanted to do, or a Whipple or a Kenny Bell or whatever. Because I have a Kenny Bell. I have a big or 2.8 liter Kenny Bell, which is way more than this motor would ever want to make. So all of that is a possibility, and all of that is a possibility with a simple adapter. The other thing I like about doing the adapter is then, and we might be able to do this on this cool side hack deal, which I really, really like, because it just looks awesome. But sandwiching an intercooler, one of these air to water, bricks in between there where we just pass water through it. Good idea on any of these positive displacement type superchargers, because we would run an intercooler running the centrifugal TORQSTORM or the turbo. Both of those, would run with an intercooler. Whether it was a blow-through carbureted deal, more than likely it would be fuel injected. But either way, I would run an intercooler on it just to be safe, and it would just make more power with the intercooler. So I would like to do an intercooler on the other one. And then on a positive displacement blower like that, if we were aiming down, we run carburetors on it, or a single carburetor probably would be enough for this. A single, 750, 850, 950, 1050, whatever it is. Because yeah, you know, you need to put a Dominator on there because you'd have to. That would be cool. And then you could run if you ran E85 in it, then it would be really good. And then of course people would want, oh well, then just put a nitrous plate on it, and you know, yada yada, and then run the turbo into the blower, and then we're talking, you know, Pontiac Trophy 4-cylinder Pro Street kind of combination. So let me know what your guys' idea is. And so the poll for today. Should I run a positive displacement supercharger on the Trophy 4-cylinder? So of some type, whatever. Just does that kind of supercharger need to be on the Pontiac 4-cylinder? Given its old school nature, I think it's a really good match. But let me let me know what you guys are doing. Yes, another live stream, John. Squirrels in the house. Casey. Yeah, Bart, the 3800 blower. Yep, we did talk about that. 1 liter Mafia is in the house. When can you test a BTR 388 big single turbo on a 6 liter with a 92 millimeter turbo? Wouldn't I have to have all of those things to do that? And why do you need to test that? You should know what all of that will do. If you're looking for 1,000 horsepower on a 5.3 with an S480, is a T4 too small, or should I jump to the T6? No, it's not too small. You can certainly make 1,000 horsepower with a T4. I'm told I got emails or texts or something telling me how off I was on that test, that if I go beyond the level where I tested it, that I will start to see 200 horsepower differences between a T6 and a T4. I honestly don't think that that's true. I don't see how that kind of difference can come given the change in boost pressure, or the difference in boost pressure and back pressure that I saw at this power level. I don't know how we could get into an area now with that on an S480 where that becomes an issue, but it will work. You can make 1,000 horsepower. Can you make 12 or 1,300? That's a different question. John, thank you very much. Did you have a question? Found on Marketplace a set of LS2 rods and pistons for $100. Nice, for my twin turbo LQ4 build. Next question: do I need to get it balanced? Yes, you will. If you have an LQ4 and you have LS2 rods and pistons, it's probably going to be close. But an LS2 is going to be a Gen 4. An LQ4 is more than likely going to be a Gen 3. So I would at least have it spun and find out. Mark, did you get my email with 655 2.2 intake pictures? I don't think so. When did you send that? Use a 450 horsepower propane mixer on top of a 671. The vacuum needed to operate the mixer shouldn't limit the boost. Propane, I think, is 110 octane. I've never tried propane on anything, so I have zero experience on that. Mark sent it last week. Yeah, I don't remember seeing it. And I would definitely look at something like that. I got a lot of emails, but I'll check and see. I'll check. Hello, all 62 guitar guy. Building a Gen 6 454 with Richard's recipe of parts. Got it all from a guy going another direction. Cool. Who said no on the poll? I know, right? Who says no to something like that? I think they're actually LQ9 based on the part number on the piston, but the seller claims it was from an LS2. Either way, an LQ9 is probably going to be a Gen 4 also, so you might want to look at that. The LQ4 stuff is definitely, or the Gen 4 stuff is definitely going to be different weights. Single Cyrus. Can we call you Billy Ray or Miley? Hello, single VS Racing Turbo stock, small block Chevy 350. And Holly 750 and recommendations on this build going in an off-road truck. You're going to need to have some sort of modified blow-through carburetor on that. And I don't what year is the 350 and what do you mean by stock? Is it a stock L82? Is it a stock L48? Is it a stock LT1? An L76, an L84? To the guy that lost 2 parts, might have been cheaper to find an LQ9 rotating assembly, or just another LQ4 in the wrecking yard. Was there ever a test for the piston flip? Yes, I did that test with the guys from Engine Masters. Larry, how is it you're streaming 24/7 and you don't get a notification? I don't know if I can go in and individually select that sort of thing. I wouldn't think so. What are big block? Is that big block Buick? Is that what BBB is? 430 rods, internally balanced floating pins, good for power wires. I have no idea. I have no experience other than if that's a Buick, other than the single 455 that I ran. Jeff's against everything. Jeff is the fun police. Larry, are you subscribed to the channel? Mark recommended that you have to be subscribed to get notifications. Oh, big block Chevy, that is. Okay. Since we've done, 1,200 horsepower with stock stuff, I think is it a 4340 rod? I don't know what 430 rod is. Options on 862 versus 7099 heads, both ported for high horsepower boost with rods, pistons, and LSXRT. What is it you're trying to find out? Either one of those heads will, like, what's your definition of high horsepower stuff? Are you trying to max out 2 S475s or even two of something bigger than that? Antos, what's up? How real are lifter failure concerns for the LS? Seems like that's a huge area of concern for the community. I find that odd given the fact that in the same breath, people are talking about going and getting 100, 200, 300, 400,000 mile wrecking yard motors that still have the original lifters in them. So why is that working? And then lifter failure is a concern. I don't understand how both of those things can be true. Did I ever think about testing a 388 cubic inch BTR cam on a 6-liter? What is a 388 cubic inch BTR cam on a 6-liter with a big turbo? Are you wanting me to test that displacement motor with some kind of big cam in it and a big turbo? Or are you wanting me to test the cam that they use in that motor on a 6-liter with a big turbo? We already know what turbos do. We already know what cams do. The cam is, you're going to put the cam in and the cam's going to make some kind of NA power. And then you're going to add a turbo. If it's a big turbo, whatever that is, whatever the turbo will support, then you just start raising the boost and it just starts making more power, multiplying what is their NA basically. Squirrels off. The lifter failures are the AFM motors. In my 250,000 mile LQ4, the lifters were stuck in the block and had to be pushed out. That's normally because they get buildup on the lifter. The lifter bore usually doesn't wear too much, but usually it's buildup on the You pushed him. You had to push him out of the bottom. So what would stop them from coming out the top? Do they have residue then built up along the bottom of the lifter that would stop them from coming out? It's got to be something simple. My lifter concern question is more about rebuilds. Okay, seems like there's a big push to avoid GM ones. I thought that the LS7 lifter was kind of the go-to deal, and going to high dollar Johnsons, for example. Probably many had to push them out from the bottom. That's not unusual for lifters to be kind of sticky coming out. Usually, like I said, because you have buildup on the lifter. And then when you have buildup on the lifter, now it's hard for it to go through the near zero tolerance fit that it has to go through. And if you have extra stuff on there, it's just not going to do it. It's like coating it. So how's our poll doing? 84% saying yes and 16% saying no, that they're not all about the positive displacement blower. So Daniel, did I answer your question about your 388? Push them out the bottom. There's buildup at the bottom of the lifter to stop them from going up. Okay, makes sense. Get a hone to clean up the lifter board to be sure. I'll bet you that it's not the bore. I'll bet you that it's stuff on the lifter that would stop them from coming out. I would see that way more often than I would see a problem in the lifter bore, because if anything, the lifter bore would tend to wear and it would be bigger and it would make more room for that. The old school hot rodders like the challenge of NA builds, but it only makes sense to add density when it's built properly. MSH68, you need to phrase your question differently and not use the word thoughts in it. We don't use the word thoughts around here. It's an open-ended question and just one of my pet peeves, man. I can't do it. Jim, Richard, I asked this in your earlier live chat, but had to bail for a work meeting. Would a stock peanut port 454 rated G-body easily annihilate the tires? Yes, it will make more than enough torque to spin the tires, especially if you combine that with gearing and wimpy tires and a converter. Jeff, you guys use Johnson lifters? Did you guys try? Were you running the stock lifters? Is there a problem with the stock lifters in that LSA motor? Or did you try LS7 lifters? Figure a couple of passes with the hone. Yeah, that's good. I don't know if I've ever seen what the factory crosshatch looks like on a lifter bore. And if it's smoother than, like, has a different surface finish. I would imagine that it does. It's a different surface finish than like the cylinder bore for the pistons. I would think that it would. I know that there has to be oil there. So it's going to have some sort of finish that's going to hold oil. Because the lifter seems to be pretty smooth. All across the internet, everyone's having problems with lifters. That might be metallurgy or assembly or material, the material that they're using. Not much different than running brushes through it. Probably so. Any chance of a legendary JDM battle? SR20, B18, 3. I'm not familiar with the 3S GTE. I know I've never run one of those, a 4G63. All of those are good, but I think that a B18 is probably not what you would use. You probably use a K20. Had Morel lifter failures too. I think probably they've had everything. Thanks, Richard. Regarding the 454 and the G-body, 308 gears, turbo 400. So right off the bat, that's going to be more difficult because a 308 gear is not very much gear, and the turbo 400 doesn't have a great first gear like a turbo 350 does. It's a little bit steeper. 255 tires are not very big. Sure, I got some specs for you on the engine. 6-liter Ford 4340, 243 heads, running 9.5 to 1 compression, 243, 251, mid 630s, 117 plus 5. Is that for a blower application, Daniel? It's the loss of zinc in motor oils causing lifter problems. I don't think that that's related. That would be more cam face related. According to Billy Gobble, flat tap lifters aren't getting priority for the good iron and probably won't come back. Wow. Richard, I just got an 04 Z06 with bent valves, LS6 car. Should I swap it in LQ9 or fix the heads on the LS6? A head swap is fairly easy. And if you just have to scuff the pistons up a little bit if they've got little dings in them from the valves. But why did it? My question is, why did it bend valves? Was it? Sounds to me like it's probably an over rev, which would be kind of common in that guys missing shifts and stuff. So it would concern me a little bit about this thing going to 8,000 or 9,000 wherever it went to on a miss shift. About other things in the motor, the bending valves is not a big deal, but hopefully it didn't hurt any connecting rods or things. Fix the heads and slap them on the OQ9. The thing about an LS6, if you have, I'm sure that has 243 heads on it. So you can take the valves out of, you can go get, I think the 317 valves will go right in that. So you can go, should be able to find those anywhere. The 706 and 862 heads, those valves won't work. If you have a real Z06, you have the lightweight valves, which you aren't going to find unless you buy them. But the other option, if you want to make it even make more power, is you can put LS3 heads on it and an LS3 intake manifold, and then it would definitely make more power. It jumped time. It can't jump time. I have never seen that happen. I've never seen a timing chain jump one tooth. It's possible to break them. I mean, my dad had a timing chain on his Blazer that got so much slop in it that it wore a hole in the timing cover, and oil would leak out the timing cover. So that's how sloppy it was, and it didn't jump time. So, like I said, the thing just moving one tooth is not. I think that's an internet myth. My guess is it's something else. Make tool steel lifters for VWs. You can swap them over to other cams with no problems. Nice. What do you think about Ford's probe industry SRS pistons for 408? I've used probe stuff and Coast High Performance stuff way back in the day. Not anything recent, but back in the day, I ran lots of their stuff. A lot of their 341 or 347s for small blocks, 408s, 393s, 331s, 325s, all that stuff. And I never had anything but good luck with their pistons. Daniel, that 117 cam is a turbo cam? And tell me, that is this, you said that this is for like a really high horsepower thing? That's not the cam that I would pick for that, but if some turbo cam expert told you that that's going to make all the power in the world, is that going to be like a 8,000 RPM camshaft or something? For rebuilding a motor, what about grooving the lifter bores? I've seen racers do that, like cup guys and stuff, but I don't know if I've seen LS guys do that. I don't know if it will improve lifter life. It'll stop them from rotating. So, Dave, the main problem you'll find with a hydraulic lifter is that they're from China. The bores are swedged and not hone fit, so the bore tolerance is very poor. And the thing about the bore tolerance on a lifter, the internal bore, you're talking about something that's very, very, very tight tolerances. And if it's not right, they're going to stick. We've had that problem with lifters before where we had them stick down at the bottom. And I remember Brule working on one and getting it to come back up. But after you do that, then you're worried about it maybe doing that again. And I'm going to run S480 turbo from Summit. And Daniel, how much power are you trying to make? If it's an S480, you're looking at 11 or 1200 horsepower. That's not the cam I would use to make that kind of power. You can make 11 or 1200 horsepower with, first of all, much smaller cams than that, very easily. If you look at all the Big Bang stuff, all of the cams that we use in that are much smaller than that. The 1500 horsepower one was like a stage 2 or 3 twin turbo cam, so it was pretty small. And it, quite honestly, I just picked that because I like Brian Tooley. And I said, look, I'm doing this. He said, well, you should at least have a twin turbo cam. That cam may have even come from LJMS at the time, because this was pretty far back. So it might have come from John back then. But it didn't have to be a twin turbo cam just because we were running 2 of them. It could have been a single turbo cam. It didn't have to be a turbo cam. It could have been an NA cam. Any cam that allowed us to make 550 or so horsepower, then it was going to make, like, we went to 1500 or whatever. Then it was going to make multiples of that number at whatever boost level we ran. And that's what it's going to do. I have an Eaton M62 and an Eaton TVS 2650. If you want to try it on the trophy 4-cylinder, I think the M62 is probably a little on the small side. An M90 would probably be as small as I would go, but an M90 on that little 4-cylinder should work good starting out with like a 200 horsepower motor, which is kind of what you would be looking at for the 3800 would be in that range, I would think, a stock one anyway. And so an M90 would be, I think, work pretty well on that combination. A 2650 would be a lot for that. That would be like the 2.8 liter Kenny Bell that I have. Mexico City's in the house. I used to groove lifter bores, was easier to grind a flat on the lifter body. Yeah, I think that's the way that they hold them is nice. It's just easier. Butcher, I have a Chrysler 2.5 turbo. Question for you. I recently did my springs and cam about 1,500 miles ago. I recently checked the timing belt, and somehow it's so tight that I couldn't even. So you couldn't do the twist. I don't know why the springs would change that. I mean, they should have had. They would have tension on them when you originally tighten the belt, right? I think this could have caused some parasitic loss. Yeah, if the belt's overly tight, that could be a little bit of a problem. Quite honestly, it's not going to be very much. I would just be more concerned about the belt breaking. I meant for lifter oiling, not to rotate, to put pressurized oil to the base of the lifter. Don't skimp on the money for your lifters. So where's the groove going to go in the lifter or the bore for lifter oiling that you're talking about, Todd? Daniel, that cam is way too big for 3 to 7,000 RPM. You need to come down like 15 or 20 degrees of duration for that. Take a look at all the videos I have up. I mean, and if you want to run to 7,000 RPM, you only need like a 225 cam or 228 cam. You could put a 231 camshaft in there like we did on some of these motors, but even that is, with the right intake manifold, could be much higher than that. Quite honestly, if you're going to run to 7,000, something like a fast LSXR or LSXRT intake manifold is going to make the most average power. It's going to be better than a high ram or any of those things there. That's going to work good. Any sort of like that comp 459 or 469-ish kind of cam, or one from Texas Speed or Brian Tooley or Cam Motion, they all have good stuff. Any of those 227, 231-ish kinds of cams will work fine. 600 lift, 112 or 113 degree LSA. So it'd be like a 231, 247 or something like that, or a 227, 243 kind of thing. Any of those cams will make enough power to do what you're talking about. I mean, just look at either one of the Big Bang motors. The cam Daniel's talking about is a BTR turbo cam, 388 cubic inch turbocharged, designed for larger displacement engines. I get that, but the 388 cubic inch turbocharged camshaft that he's talking about is designed for stuff making 2,000 or 3,000 horsepower, though. It's designed for like maximum effort stuff. And so if you're trying to run 2,000 or 2,500 horsepower, that's a different camshaft than trying to run a 1,000 horsepower motor. 1,000 horsepower motor is really easy to do, or even 11 or 1,200 horsepower motor is really easy to do. Obviously, I've done it, so it has to be easy because I'm not one of these 2,500 or 3,000 horsepower kind of guys. I've never built a motor like that, but I've done lots of them that are, now 1,500 and less. I have a Gen 5 3.8 liter Whipple if you want to try it. I think we have enough supercharge, right? The 2.8 Kenny Bell, if I would put that on there, would be more than enough. The 671. I was also thinking about one of the little like 177 Holly or Wyan blowers, which would be good on there too. Richard, I don't believe you can put an LS3 head. That's right. It's not a. I'm thinking LS2 again, but that's an LS6, so that's a 5.7. So he can't use LS2 pistons in that anyway, because it's a 5.7. So an LS2 is a 6 liter. Am I thinking about the right one now? Cam's a 224, 228 twin GT35 6 liter. Okay. I personally was more worried about breaking in the new camshaft. I've heard that happening before, but in my head, I would think that the timing belt would go before the camshaft. Probably the belt would go first, I would think. You sell a tool that scribes a 10,000 groove in the lower bore below the oil passage. Yeah. I've only done one motor so far, but it has a few miles on it so far. So you're putting a groove down from the oiling hole. Is that what you're doing? I've not seen that, and I haven't talked to any of the engine builders about that, but that seems right. They also put that tiny slot between the lifter oil feed hole and the lower body on the hydraulics. I'm looking to make 1,500, and that's way too big for my build. It is. I mean, that's their all of it kind of camshaft that they use for those when they do those 388 builds. Those are the like the LSX blocks or those kinds of aftermarket blocks. They're a Dragon Slayer crank and all that stuff, and they're the things that they were building for some of those turbo classes, and so it's it's like an all of it kind of thing. Brian Tooley, spec me a cam, intake 231, 639. Exhaust is 240 something at 639. LSA is 115, putting in a stroke 5.3 direct injected motor with twins. Direct injected. So is this for a Gen 5 motor then? Is it a L83? I'm about to fire up a big block Chevy with a 256 Wyand on it. Good. Just my opinion, a turbo cam should always be smaller than an NA cam because there's always more boost unless it's a drag race. Bill, I'm with you there. Not exactly that, but I usually tell people that on the turbo stuff, they should err on the small side because it does two things. One, it helps the turbo come up sooner, so better boost response down low, also better drivability. And then you just make it so that there's enough cam if you're intending on doing it to utilize all of the turbo. If you have 1,000 horsepower turbo, almost any camshaft is enough camshaft in an LS to get a combination to make 1,000 horsepower. So you may as well pick the milder cam to get all of the other things and still have the 1,000 horsepower. And I know I went through this before that we had to have a stage 2 or 3 or 4 camshaft, you know, because we're building a 1,000 horsepower motor. And I finally it finally dawned on me that, hey, you don't have to have that. You have boost. So it will you just keep adding that power if you want to keep adding it. Yeah, I'm going somewhat budget with a stock block, so I know 1,500 is ambitious. 1,500 is not something you probably can run a lot at the drag strip at that power level with a stock block anyway. I know we've done it on the engine dyno, and guys do it out at the track. But that's about the level where guys start thinking about doing, start worrying about the mains moving around and stuff. Not all blowers need to live on the top of the engine. I know the Potvin, am I pronouncing that correctly? The ones that were mounted up in front for the Bonneville guys, and then they run the tubes up to it. It can be side mounted. You could do lots of stuff. Can't wait for the LT 6.6 engines to start showing up. Aaron, yes, it is, and it'll add port injection as well. Yeah, you're going to have to make lots of power with that. The fuel side of the direct injected stuff, the LT stuff, gets kind of expensive. Grooving lifter boards is not an easy job because removing the boards after you cut the groove is very difficult. So you have to keep working on the lifter bore until the lifter spins freely. Paxton and McCullough were a couple centrifugal. Yeah, those are centrifugal supercharged. Dan, we talked about that earlier. That's been the plan all along for the Pontiac motor. Is TORQSTORM makes a Pontiac kit for the Pontiac V8. Lucky for me, we have enough on the 4-cylinder to be able to mount that centrifugal supercharger, which would be like a Paxton or McCullough. Those are kind of older versions. I think the McCullough was also. I know that the Paxton was a planetary drive. I'm not sure about the McCullough. Maybe that was the same thing. John, so 1,500 is the goal, starting out around 12 or 13 with twin VS 78, 75s. I honestly think that you have too much turbo there too, because you have almost 2,000 horsepower worth of turbo there, and it's always good to have more than you need. But if you're never going to go past that middle point, you could get something because that's going to be a little bit soft. You could have something that's more responsive. But Dan brought up a good point. The drivetrain that you're talking about for that kind of power is going to be pretty expensive. Put a front mount blower setup on a 52 Chrysler. That would be good. I still like the one that the guys from Clay Smith brought in. That front mounted blower with the injection on it and then going into 183 cubic inch small block Chevy, which I thought was, multiple kinds of awesomeness. So our poll is at 86% saying yes. Should I run a positive displacement supercharger on the Trophy 4-cylinder? I even left that window pretty wide open there for different kinds. Like I didn't say it had to be a 371 or a 471 or a 671 or 8 or a 1471. It could be a Whipple. It could be a Kenny Bell. It could be a Magnuson. Could be a Wyand. You know, I think one of the small Wyands on there would work pretty well actually. And everyone hit the like button. We got 145 people here and only 61 likes. I'm just not feeling the love. I'm not even feeling the like. I already have a built turbo 3400. It's going in a 2004 Colorado, the 9-inch rear end. So that's good stuff. The GM Detroit blower would kind of keep it in the family. I agree, Dan. I think so. That's why I like the photo of the one. If you've taken a look at the thumbnail, it really is cool. I mean, it's cool because that's an old school kind of motor, and it's an old school blower, and it's an old school intake, and it's all just OG stuff. Gino, I have twin S369s on my 383 LS, and they work great and around 1100. Yeah, and there's more. Those turbos will definitely support more, and it's probably pretty responsive with that combination. Roman 355 small block Chevy with slight dome pistons, 3030 Duntov cam. What kind of horsepower could I expect if I get aluminum aftermarket heads? That's not a great camshaft because it's fairly low lift. There are much, much better camshafts. But you could expect certainly 40 or 50 horsepower from a set of like airflow research heads in place of the stock. If that has like fuelie heads on it, they would be much better. You would get even more if you started out with both of those heads with a better camshaft. That's a fairly low lift cam, and it's not going to be making much power. So it's really not taking advantage of what much better flowing heads have to offer, because that if you have a fuelie head on it, that head probably flows 200-ish or something, and a good set of 195 airflow research heads are going to be 280, 290, or 300, depending on which one you get. So it's going to be a big change in potential power. So you're looking at something that's like a 400 horsepower combination or cylinder head to a 600 horsepower cylinder head. Crank driven roots blower, it would be area correct too. Not just era correct. I miss the magazines, but you got to admit it's pretty cool to be able to chat with these guys. Yeah, I agree, and I get to talk to a lot of people in the industry that's, you know, it's made that possible, and it's really kind of cool. I chose the 7875s because I got a deal on them. Say no more, man. That's that's how we make a lot of our decisions. That's how I make mine. Mirrored and wanted them to have low back pressure. That's good. You don't need to change turbos, just add displacement. Are the cheapest aftermarket aluminum 350 Chevy heads worth anything on horsepower versus a stock 75 vet L48 head, or is it just beneficial or weight loss? It's both. A cheap set of aftermarket aluminum heads like a Skip White or something are going to be a lot better than an L48 head, especially from 75. That's the L48 head's probably, I think if I remember, probably is a big chamber head. You can get a smaller chamber head, which right away is going to make more power. It is going to be aluminum, so it's not going to detonate. It's going to be less susceptible to detonation. It's going to have less weight, and it's going to flow more. It's going to flow at least 50 CFM more. At least. Yeah, an L48 head is not, I mean, I think that would be like in 75, that might be like an 882 or something, right? Which is not stellar. I know, I've tested those. Back up to 87%, 13% saying no. So let's get that 87 up. I want to see that 87 pushed up to 90. So let's get the likes up to over 100. Right now it's at 84. And let's get the yes votes up over up. We want to get the yes votes up over 90%. 50 CFM is some serious action. Wouldn't it be nice to gain 50 CFM from porting 2.2 heads? That would be good. Some camel humps might work well. The only thing that the camel humps would add would be compression. I got my Trek Norris cam for my LR4. Eddie Monner head would run away in high. Yeah, camel hump is not. I mean, it's back in the day, it was okay, but look at look at that versus like even a Boss 302 head. It's not. Papa's Garage. Freiburger did text me and say that I needed to basically buy that intake manifold. In another dimension, someone has done that. Yeah, I think that the heads now might be done from the Car Farm guys, I think. And so I should be getting those, and I should be able to test them, airflow test them before too long here. I felt a nice gain in power and exhaust note when I went from E7s to GT40Ps on my 5-liter. I don't have that test done for small block Chevys, but I do have it done for small block Fords. So even if if you have a Chevy, it doesn't matter. Go over to the small block Ford stuff and take a look at what happened when we went from a head that flowed like a stock E7 TE head. Is if we put any kind of aftermarket head on it. In that case, we gain power. We gain as much as 100 horsepower. So it's a lot. I mean, with a decent head on it. And admittedly, an E7 head flows less than, it probably doesn't flow too much less than an L48 head. It might be a little down on that compared to a little bit, but it will be down compared to a Fuelie head or a Vortec head, but the aftermarket heads are still going to be way, way better. Any news on the 3800 head porting? No, I don't. I think I just need to get those back. Yeah, and any aftermarket head, you see that on the GT40P stuff. The GT40P heads were a little bit better, and the GT40 iron heads are a little bit better than the E7 heads, like 30 or something, 35 or something. But all of the aftermarket heads were way better. Camelback heads don't have accessory bolt holes on the ends either. The early ones don't, yeah. Couldn't get over 18 pounds of boost without having back pressure climbing. Don't have a back pressure sensor. We are basing it on dome pressure versus boost pressure. Greeting from the south coast of Louisiana. Cool. Thank you for sharing all the great information. Jude, and if you ever wanted to send beignets, I don't know if you're in the area, if you're in that area of Louisiana, but beignets are always welcome. One of our favorite desserts is going to the Café du Monde that they had when we lived near Disneyland. We would go into downtown Disney and go to the Café du Monde that they had there just to get beignets with basically, it's just hot dough in a bag full of powdered sugar, which is, it's as good as it sounds. I'm sorry, I'm one of the 14% that actually voted no. It wouldn't let me change my vote. Well, you need to sign off and then sign back on and then go vote again. Best placement for turbo wastegate, right before or 18 inches before the turbo. The best placement for a wastegate is on an elbow right before the turbo. Straight in the direction of the exhaust flow, and then the bend goes up into the turbo, but the exhaust flow goes straight to the wastegate. That's what all of the cool, like super professional race teams do. I've heard people swear E7s over earlier small block Ford heads. The 69 351 Windsor heads were supposed to be the go-to head. Those have got to be better than an E7. I just haven't seen direct flow testing on those. David, greetings from Australia. From the land down under, love your L67 work. Mine is watered air with ported heads, soon to be E85. It's definitely going to love the E85. And I hope that you also have a camshaft in that thing, because they really like better than stock cam timing. 7,500 and 35 PSI over ambient should be 2,000 horsepower. I would think so. 5.7 Hemi with eagle heads and a Dakota. What intake? The truck intake is not going to cut it. I don't know if it is the Jim. I haven't done much with the eagle heads, but is the eagle head a different intake bolt pattern than like a 6.1 SRT, like an SRT8 intake manifold? Are the later ones specific to later intake manifolds? Dan, I think that the 351 Windsor was like a GT40 head. That's what I've been told, that it would be comparable to that. I don't know if it is. It's got to be better than an E7 head, though, or better than a Hypo 289 head or any of those. I can barely get my thumb in the exhaust port of an early small left forward head. Yeah, especially with that thermactor bump. Oh, we're up to 88%. Come on. We need some more votes. You guys need to sign off and then sign back on and then vote yes. We got our likes up to 100 and over 100, which I like. So we're going in the right direction here. This is a good night. GT40 had the same valves as the old 351 Windsor, but less flow rating. The early truck does not match by a long way. Jim, and I didn't know this until after we had tested it because I ran it that way anyway. But the SRT8 intake manifold is a different port pattern than we ran both the truck and the early truck and the Magnum, the long runner style, which works really well. But the SRT8 is different. 289 hypos had screw and rocker studs. Yep, I had one of those. Brand new LS3 block, very smooth lifter bores. They should be. Send some Holden V8 and some Aussie Cleveland heads to test. The Aussie Cleveland heads, I have seen those. The 2V Cleveland heads. Those are obviously better than the open chamber ones. Not what a 4V head is, but still better than the big chamber 2V stuff. 289 heads also had cast-in spring buckets. I had a 65 Hypo 289. .317 head and only 9.9 compression. Gino, are the 317 heads that they're ported? I take it then. The thing that I didn't like about those 289s weren't the rockers like a cast rocker? Is it true that the best Windsor heads of today are better than Cleveland heads? Almost. There are lots of aftermarket Windsor heads that will make more power than a stock Cleveland head, but there are now also aftermarket Cleveland heads, and so those make a lot of power. Our Cleveland Ford 400M head's the same. Yeah, a 400M basically has an open chamber 2V Cleveland head. So it's the same head. You can put 400 or 4V Cleveland heads on a 400M. You can put any of the aftermarket heads on a 400M also. Which makes me wonder if we couldn't put, because I ran CHI 3V heads on a 400. But it makes me wonder if we can't put Windsor heads on a 400M, modified Windsor heads, and then we'd have to worry about doing an intake manifold. But you have to do spacers anyway, so why wouldn't you just do spacers and then put Windsor stuff on it? Just because there's more stuff for Windsors. Stock unported 317s. Changing to TFS pretty soon. Oh, a stock Windsor versus a stock Cleveland is not is not even close. Have you noticed getting more power out of an LS running 160, 180 degree thermostat? We don't do that on the engine dyno because we don't have thermostats in the motors. The dyno is controlled. I normally run them at much lower temperature than that anyway. We run if we're doing repetitive back-to-back testing, we put the oil temperature at one thing and then the water temperature at one thing. But normally I'm running, it's about 140 degrees anyways. So, and yeah, it makes more power especially down low, it makes more power. The ideal situation is cold water and hot oil. Yes, a reverse Cleavor, that's right. The best stock setup I had was a 302 Windsor with Cleveland heads, like a Boss 302, before I bought a good set of aftermarket heads. Nick Williams 160 is still in the warm-up cycle with EFI. That can become a problem with EFI stuff, depending on what the settings are. Your mileage can kind of suffer. If you can put LS heads on 351, how about putting LS heads on a 400? You could do that too. It's not it's not as easy as people think, but you can. I was thinking 400M heads on a 302 or a 351 Windsor. I don't know why you would do that. It's just a 2V Cleveland head, and you just get a 2V Cleveland head, not a 400M head. They're all the same. You'd be better off putting a 4V head on there, or a CHI 3V, or TFS 3V, or 4V, or whatever they're calling it. Edelbrock also has some as well. What's the highest stack compression you have run on propane? Well, that's an easy answer for me because I've never run propane on anything, so I've never done that. I have a video up of Boss 302 stuff. We have stock ones a stock one that I ran. They did a reproduction on, and then also modified versions of that, and it worked pretty well. It's an impressive motor. It has enough head flow to support 550 or more horsepower just from a stock set of heads with a stock valve job and all that, because they flowed like 275, which puts us, way into the middle 500s. But you have to have enough motors to do that also. A Mercruiser 351 Windsor 4-barrel made to go into my 302 Ranchero. Both are mid-70s engines. On paper, the boat has 100 more horsepower. Well, that's good. Met a guy racing a propane big block at 15-1. I remember reading, and I might have, who is it? Who's the propane guy? I keep wanting to say Morrison, but that's not it. Somebody tell me who the propane guy is. No, yeah, Hank Hill, yeah. No, it's not Hank Hill. Who did all the books on propane stuff? Ack Miller, that's who it is. I think I have one or two of Ack Miller's books up here on propane stuff. And you could run lots of static compression with that. NASCAR ran 17-1 on restrictors. Propane accessories. It's a neat setup. Betting 2 IMCO converters on that wanting, say, Model E's. Hoping to find some rock crawler guys. Well, I'm not a rock crawler guy, but the motor stuff would be the same. Although you guys get in some fairly steep angles for carburation, so I think fuel injection probably would be better for that. Why do circle track guys love the Holley? They are that 500 CFM Holley, the 4412 is required for a lot of sanctioning bodies. And Ackmiller did a lot of propane and force induction stuff too. The original 160-pound Bosch injectors, we tried those back in the day, the Ford ones. Everyone liked were swiped from LPG systems. I believe they would vaporize the fuel, then feed the gas into the injectors, but do not quote me on that. I thought that the 160-pound injectors were the dual fuel ones, but was the other fuel LPG? Don't understand why so many guys are stuck on the 302 small block. I think that's probably because they didn't make 390s in the 5-liter Ford, which kind of revolutionized or at least reinvigorated Ford performance and kind of ushered in the modern, anyway, and this has been a while now, but the second coming of Ford performance. It created a $1 billion or more industry around the 5-liter Ford. And that's something that the FE stuff never did. And I know that they they won Le Mans, which the 5-liter Mustang obviously never did. $160 Bosches are gas, CNG, LPG. Okay. I just remember that they were dual fuel ones, and I remember them not. I remember the injector slope on them being weird and them being a little bit problematic to tune. Although we did run them when I ran the B series Honda on the engine dyno when we borrowed Mahovitz's 76, one of his 76 millimeter turbos. And again, we didn't size it for this. I just wanted something bigger. So we borrowed his 76 millimeter turbo and ran it on my B20 and ran it at like 29 pounds. And that's when it made 728 or something. But we ran it with those injectors. 2 more minutes. We're going to close out our poll at 86%. So we never got it back up over 90. I'm a little disappointed. Come on, you guys. What's going on? 249 votes. So I do like that. So we're going to end our poll on the positive note that guys do want to see a positive displacement blower, as it were. 122 thumbs up. We're ending our poll. I just watched a video about a 429. They're praising it for how lightweight it is. You should run a rear mount on a 4-cylinder truck. Is using a Ford Windstar intake on a 3.8-liter V6 help flow or stock intake a myth real? I don't know. What is the Ford Windstar, a V6 intake already? Is it a 3.8 liter? Is that intake different than the other one that you're talking about? I'm just not hip on Windstar stuff. I know the Buick 455s were very light. Disadvantages of a gear timing drive. Nobody uses those for really any form of racing anymore. They apply harmonics to the valve train, I think is the problem with them. They're very noisy, and most people use belt drives for racing. K24 daily turbo or all motor. Myself, I would put a turbo on a K24. And if it's a daily, I would just leave it stock and then just run boost on it. Because you could run 7-10 pounds or whatever on a daily, more if you run E85 in it and have it tuned correctly. And you can run it, and 10 pounds in a K24 is going to be pretty sporty. Is there any Mopar 360 Magnum engines coming up for testing? I have one already. We've done some stuff on it, and I have some videos up. I think that isn't the 292 Chevy that I have, isn't that gear driven? But then it only revs to 4,000 RPM. Have you ever run a centrifugal supercharger in tandem with a turbo? I don't know why you would do that. That wouldn't be a good match. Usually people put roots blowers and then run turbos on those. And I have done that several times. But a centrifugal supercharger and a turbo would not be a good mix because one of them wouldn't be augmenting a place where the other one is weak. They're both, if anything, the roots blower has immediate boost response, and neither one of those other two do. So that's why they usually combine that. Richard, I was curious how the early 70s big block Chevy made such high horsepower. Like a LS6 454 made 1 horsepower per cubic inch, basically. That's what it was rated at. But they had all of that stuff going for it. They had high compression. It was 11-to-1. They had good flowing heads. The rec port heads flowed very well. They had a good dual plane intake manifold. They had a big carburetor. They had lots of camshaft. They had everything that they needed to make that. .300 made so much low end torque they could almost rotate the Earth, is what you're trying to say. Make the Earth tilt. Did it? See, that would be my question. That's a myth that's been perpetuated for a long time. Does a 300-inch inline 6-cylinder make more torque than a 300-inch V8? So maybe we'll have to talk about it tomorrow because it's time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. Thank you all for showing up. And on that note, it's time to go. So I want you to think about that. That's your homework for tonight. Which one of those 300-inch motors would make more torque, a V8 or an inline 6-cylinder? And then we can talk about that tomorrow, maybe even tomorrow morning, because I will be back tomorrow morning for your motivational project live feed in the morning. See you guys later.